The champagne flute trembled in my hand, sending tiny ripples across the golden liquid. Around me, the ballroom of the St. Regis hummed with wealth, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, and somewhere a string quartet played something classical I couldn't name. I didn't belong here. I was invisible. Just another server in a black uniform weaving between tables laden with food most of these people wouldn't touch. My feet ached in the cheap heels I'd bought at a discount store, and the fabric of my shirt pulled uncomfortably across my shoulders. But I needed this job, needed the tips that would barely cover next month's rent in my studio apartment, with the leaking ceiling and the neighbor who screamed at 3 a.m. "More champagne, table 7, my supervisor hissed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. I nodded, grabbing a fresh bottle from the service station. My reflection caught in one of the ornate mirrors lining the walls, pale face, dark circles under green eyes, blonde hair pulled back so tightly it made my scalp ache. I looked exactly like what I was. 26 years old and exhausted by life. Table 7 sat in a corner, partially obscured by an elaborate floral arrangement of white roses and something dark, black calla lilies, I realized. Unusual. Ominous even. As I approached, I noticed the security first. 2 men in expensive suits, earpieces visible, standing at strategic angles. Not typical wedding guests. Then I saw him. He sat with his back to the wall, a position that gave him a clear view of every entrance and exit. Even seated, I could tell he was tall. Dark hair styled with careless precision, the kind that cost more than I made in a month. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to shoulders that suggested both violence and restraint. But it was his hands I noticed most, resting on the white tablecloth, long fingers adorned with a single ring, heavy and gold, hands that looked like they could cradle a child or crush a throat with equal ease. I shouldn't have stared. I knew better. But something about him commanded attention, the way gravity commanded falling objects. He was young, maybe 32, 33, but carried himself with the weight of someone who'd lived multiple lifetimes. The other guests seemed to sense it too, giving his table a wide berth despite its prime location. "Champagne, sir?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. He didn't look up immediately. Instead, he finished whatever he was reading on his phone, one of 3 devices on the table, before his gaze lifted to meet mine. Dark eyes, nearly black in the chandelier light, assessed me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Not sexual exactly, more like he was cataloging every detail, filing me away in some mental database. "Thank you." His voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous in its softness. I leaned forward to pour, acutely aware of his cologne, something expensive with notes of cedar and smoke. My hand steadied as I tilted the bottle, watching the champagne cascade into his glass without spilling a drop. A small victory. That's when I noticed the woman. She approached from the opposite side, her red dress a slash of color against the room's muted elegance, beautiful in that sharp, calculated way. High cheekbones, lips painted the color of fresh blood, eyes that promised things I couldn't name. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Dante," she purred, her hand already reaching for his shoulder. I started to step back, to disappear as servers were trained to do. But the bottle caught on the edge of his water glass. Crystal, expensive, probably worth more than my car. Everything happened in slow motion. The glass tipped, water arcing through the air in a perfect, terrible parabola. I lunged to catch it, overcorrected, and watched in horror as champagne splashed across the front of his suit jacket. Time stopped. The quartet continued playing, conversations buzzed around us. But in our corner, silence descended like a guillotine blade. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, grabbing napkins with shaking hands. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning. Don't." One word, soft as silk, sharp as a knife. I froze, napkins clutched uselessly in my hands. His security had moved closer, tension radiating from them like heat. The woman in red watched with barely concealed amusement, her lips curving into a smile that made my stomach turn. Dante, apparently his name, stood slowly. He was taller than I'd thought, at least 6'2", and the wet fabric clung to a chest that confirmed my earlier assessment about violence and restraint. He removed his jacket with deliberate movements, revealing a white shirt that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "What's your name?" He asked it casually, but I heard the command underneath, "Emma." My throat was dry. "Emma Collins. I'm so sorry. I'll speak to my supervisor about paying." "Emma." He said it like he was testing how it tasted. "You're afraid?" It wasn't a question. I nodded anyway, unable to form words. "You should be." He handed his jacket to one of his security guards without looking, but not of me. His gaze shifted to the woman in red, and something passed between them, a conversation conducted entirely in silence. She took a step back, her smile faltering. "Leave," Dante said quietly. For a moment I thought he meant me, but the woman's face went pale beneath her makeup. "You can't seriously—" "I don't repeat myself, Viviana." She left, heels clicking angrily against marble. I stood there, still clutching my napkins, wondering if I was about to be fired or worse. Around us, the party continued, but I swear I felt eyes on us. Curious, calculating, afraid. Dante's attention returned to me, and I resisted the urge to step back. Up close, I could see details I'd missed before. A small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The shadow of stubble along his jaw. The way his eyes held mine without blinking, without wavering. Like he could see straight through to every secret I'd ever kept. "You're shaking," he observed. "I just ruined your suit. It's replaceable." He paused, head tilting slightly. "You work here often?" "This is my third event." The words tumbled out. "I usually work at Romano's downtown, but they needed extra staff tonight, and the pay was better, so I stopped myself, heat flooding my cheeks. "I'm sorry, you don't need my life story." Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "Romano's on Fifth Avenue?" I nodded, confused by the question. "Good food." He pulled out his phone, one of the three, and typed something quickly. "What time does your shift end?" "What?" "Your shift." "When does it end?" 11:30, but I don't understand." "My driver will take you home." He said it like it was already decided, like my opinion was irrelevant. "The streets aren't safe at midnight for a woman alone." "That's not necessary," I protested. Even as part of me recognized the truth in his words. I usually took the subway, looking over my shoulder the entire way. Keys gripped between my fingers like makeshift weapons. "I can manage." "I'm sure you can." His voice held something that might have been respect. "But you won't have to, not tonight." One of his security guards appeared at his elbow, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Dante nodded, then looked back at me. "I have business to attend to. Marco will find you when you're finished." He gestured to one of the guards, a barrel-chested man with kind eyes and scarred knuckles. "Don't refuse, Emma. It would be unwise." It wasn't a threat, exactly. But the implication hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken consequences. Before I could respond, my supervisor materialized at my shoulder, her face the color of spoiled milk. "Mr. Moretti, I apologize profusely for my employee's clumsiness. She'll be terminated immediately, and of course we'll cover all costs." "No," the single word stopped her mid-sentence. "She stays," Dante continued, his voice still quiet, still controlled. "And if I hear she's been disciplined for this incident, I'll ensure this establishment loses my family's patronage, permanently. Do we understand each other?" My supervisor's throat worked. "Yes, Mr. Moretti. Of course. Thank you for your generosity." He didn't acknowledge her. His eyes held mine for another long moment, something unreadable in their depths. Then he turned and walked away, his security falling into formation around him like planets orbiting a dark star. I stood there, champagne-sticky napkins still clutched in my hands, trying to understand what had just happened. "Do you have any idea who that was?" My supervisor hissed once he was out of earshot. I shook my head, numb. "Dante Moretti. The Dante Moretti." She said it like I should know, like everyone should know. His family practically owns half of Boston. Hotels, restaurants, construction companies. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Other things too. Things people don't talk about." The implication settled over me like ice water. Mafia. I'd just drenched a mafia boss in champagne. and he'd offered me a ride home. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of champagne refills and half-heard conversations. My hands moved automatically, pouring, clearing, smiling blankly, while my mind spun in useless circles. Every time I glanced toward table 7, Dante was gone. But his security remained. Silent sentinels who tracked my movements across the ballroom with unwavering attention. It should have terrified me. It did terrify me. But underneath the fear, something else stirred. Something I didn't want to examine too closely. At 11:20, my supervisor dismissed me with a curt nod and a warning look that said, "Don't screw this up again." I changed in the staff bathroom, trading my uniform for jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, my fingers fumbling with the zipper. In the mirror, my reflection looked haunted. Pale skin, 2 bright eyes, blonde hair escaping its elastic and messy strands. I looked exactly like what I was. A woman running from ghosts. 6 months ago, I'd been engaged. I'd been planning a wedding, picking out flowers, imagining a future that included children and a white picket fence and all the stupid, ordinary dreams girls are taught to want. Then came the diagnosis: premature ovarian failure. The doctor's words had been clinical, detached. Your chances of conceiving naturally are less than 1%. Derek had left 3 weeks later. Not immediately. He wasn't cruel enough for that, but I'd seen it in his eyes, the way his smile no longer reached them. The way he flinched when I mentioned baby showers or our friends' pregnancy announcements. He'd wanted children, needed them apparently, more than he needed me. "You're broken," he'd said during our final fight. Not angry, just stating a fact. I can't build a life with someone who's broken. So I'd packed my things, moved to Boston, and started over in a city where nobody knew my name or my failures. Became invisible, safe in my invisibility. Until tonight. Marco waited by the service entrance, exactly where Dante said he'd be. Up close, he looked older than I'd thought. Maybe 50. With silver threading through his dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he hadn't always worked for dangerous men. "Miss Collins." He nodded respectfully, holding open the door to a black Mercedes S-Class with windows too dark to see through. "If you'll come with me." I hesitated on the threshold between the building's fluorescent brightness and the night's deeper shadows. Everything in me screamed this was a mistake, that accepting rides from Mafia bosses, even through their drivers, was how girls ended up as headlines, but my feet hurt. And the subway would be crowded with drunk men who thought exhausted women owed them smiles, conversations, phone numbers, and some traitorous part of me wanted to know what happened next, wanted to see where this strange night would lead. I got in the car. The interior smelled like leather, and that same cedar smoke cologne Dante had worn. The seats were heated despite the mild September weather, and classical music played softly through speakers I couldn't see. Marco drove with practiced ease, navigating Boston's tangled streets without needing directions. "How does he know where I live?" I asked, then immediately regretted speaking. Marco's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, kind despite their alertness. "Mr. Moretti is thorough in all matters concerning those under his protection. I'm not under his protection, aren't you?" It wasn't really a question. "He sent me to ensure your safe arrival home." "That's protection, Miss Collins." I wanted to argue, but the words died in my throat. We drove in silence through neighborhoods that shifted from wealthy to working class. The storefronts changing from boutiques to bodegas. The people on the streets less polished, more real. Finally, Marco pulled up in front of my building. A pre-war walk-up with peeling paint and a broken intercom. "Thank you," I said, reaching for the door handle. "Miss Collins." Marco's voice stopped me. "Mr. Moretti asked me to give you this." He handed me a business card. Heavy stock, expensive, just a name, Dante Moretti, and a phone number. No title, no company, like he didn't need to explain who he was. "I don't understand." "You will." Marco's smile was enigmatic. "Sleep well." I climbed 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, legs shaking from more than exhaustion. Inside, the familiar cramped space should have been comforting. Instead, it felt suffocating. One room serving as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. A bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. Water stains on the ceiling from the unit above, and the perpetual smell of Mrs. Chen's cooking seeping through the walls. This was my life. Small, contained, safe. I set the business card on my nightstand and tried not to look at it. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, I dreamed of dark eyes and quiet voices and hands that could destroy or protect with equal precision. Morning arrived too soon, dragging me from restless sleep with the insistence of my alarm clock's shrill beeping. Saturday meant my shift at Romano's, the restaurant Marco had mentioned, the one Dante apparently knew. I'd worked there for 4 months, serving pasta to businessmen and tourists who tipped based on how much cleavage I showed, rather than the quality of service. The fall air bit through my jacket as I walked the 6 blocks to work, carrying the smell of exhaust and roasting coffee, and the particular dampness of a city built on filled-in marshland. I kept my head down, earbuds in even though no music played, the universal signal for don't talk to me. Romano's occupied the ground floor of a historic brownstone, all exposed brick and low lighting designed to feel romantic. I tied on my apron in the back, nodding to the other servers, Jessica with her perfectly highlighted hair, Marcus who was putting himself through law school, old Tony who'd been here since the place opened 30 years ago. "You look terrible," Jessica observed, applying lipstick in the staff mirror. "Rough night?" "Long night." I didn't elaborate. The lunch shift started slow. A few tourists, some locals, nobody particularly memorable. I fell into the familiar rhythm of taking orders, delivering food, clearing tables. Mindless. Safe. Then the door opened, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. Dante entered with 4 men flanking him. Security, obviously, though they tried to look casual in their expensive suits. He moved through the restaurant like he owned it, which I suddenly suspected he might. The hostess stammered a greeting, her hands fluttering nervously as she grabbed menus. "Table 12, please," Dante said, his voice carrying that same quiet authority I remembered from last night. "And Emma will be our server." Every head in the restaurant turned, including mine. Our eyes met across the dining room, and I felt that same assessment, that same cataloging intensity. He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the strangeness of this moment, just waited, patient as a predator. The hostess looked at me desperately. I forced my legs to move, weaving through tables until I stood before him again. In daylight streaming through the windows, he looked different. Still dangerous, still commanding, but younger somehow. More human. "Good afternoon, Mr. Moretti. Professional, distant. Can I start you with something to drink? Espresso, double." He handed the menu back without opening it. "And bring another for yourself. Sit." "I'm working." Tony. Dante's gaze shifted to my manager, who'd materialized from the kitchen with the speed of a man who recognized both opportunity and threat. "Emma will be taking her break now." "Yes?" It wasn't a question. Tony nodded so hard I thought his head might detach. "Of course, Mr. Moretti. Take all the time you need, Emma." I wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some semblance of control over my own life, but Dante's security had positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the restaurant, and every instinct I possessed screamed that defying him would be monumentally stupid. I sat. Up close, in natural light, I noticed more details. The precise way his shirt collar sat against his throat. The platinum watch on his left wrist, subtle but undoubtedly expensive. The way his jaw tightened slightly when one of his men's phones buzzed. Irritation at the interruption, quickly controlled. "You're afraid again," he observed. "You keep showing up in my life uninvited. Invited, uninvited." He shrugged, the gesture somehow elegant. "These are relative terms." "No. They're pretty absolute, actually." That earned me something that might have been a smile. Microscopic, there and gone. "You have spine. Good. You'll need it." Before I could ask what that meant, Jessica appeared with our espressos, her hands trembling slightly as she set them down. She left without her usual chatter, and I realized the entire restaurant had gone quiet. Everyone pretending not to watch while watching intently. I wrapped my hands around the tiny cup, grateful for something to do. "Why are you here?" "The veal is excellent. Mr. Moretti." "Dante." He took a sip of his espresso, dark eyes never leaving mine. "And I'm here because I want to know why a woman with your education works 2 service jobs to afford an apartment in one of the worst neighborhoods in Boston." My blood went cold. "How do you—" "I told you," I'm thorough." He set down his cup with precise care. "Bachelor's degree in literature from a state university. Dean's List all 4 years. You were accepted to a graduate program at Boston College, but deferred indefinitely. Before Boston, you lived in Providence. Before that, a small town in New Hampshire I won't name because I suspect you're running from it." Each word landed like a physical blow. He knew. He'd looked into me, invaded the privacy I'd worked so hard to construct. "You had no right. I have every right to know about people who enter my sphere." His voice remained quiet, but something harder edged underneath. "Last night you spilled champagne on me. An accident, probably. But accidents can be staged, distractions can be deadly. So yes, Emma Collins, I had every right to investigate whether you were a threat. And?" My hands shook, making the espresso cup rattle against its saucer. "Am I a threat?" "No." He leaned forward slightly, and I caught that cedar smoke scent again. "You're running from a broken engagement to a man who wasn't worth your tears. You work yourself to exhaustion because staying busy means not thinking. You eat 1 meal a day because rent is expensive and pride is cheaper than asking for help. You're alone in a city that doesn't care whether you live or die." Tears burned behind my eyes. I refused to let them fall. "What do you want from me?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his words were careful, measured. "I want to offer you a proposition." "I'm not sleeping with you." The words came out sharper than intended, defensive. To my surprise, he laughed, actually laughed. A low, rusty sound that suggested he didn't do it often. "No, though I appreciate the directness." His expression sobered. "I need a wife, Emma, and you need a way out of the life you're currently trapped in." The restaurant spun. I gripped the table's edge, certain I'd misheard. "You're insane." "Possibly." He pulled out his phone, one of 3, I noticed again, and scrolled through something before turning the screen toward me. Photographs. 9 children, ranging from maybe 2 years old to early teens. Different features, different coloring, but all beautiful in that way. Children are before life hardens them. "These are mine," Dante said quietly. 9 children from 3 different mothers who decided motherhood was less appealing than the settlements I offered. They live with nannies, see me when my schedule allows, and deserve better than a father who's married to his work. I stared at the photos, unable to process what he was telling me. "You need someone infertile," I whispered, understanding dawning like sickness. "You investigated me and found out about my diagnosis. I found out you were told you couldn't have children by a doctor who gave you statistics, not absolutes. I found out the man you planned to marry called you broken and left. I found out you've spent 6 months believing you're worth less because your body doesn't conform to someone else's expectations." His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching mine. "I'm offering you a different story, Emma. Be my wife, mother my children. In return, you'll have security, comfort, and purpose. No love, no messy emotions. Just a contract between 2 people who need something the other can provide." This is crazy, but even as I said it, I felt the pull, the terrible, seductive logic of his offer. "You have 3 days to decide." Dante stood, pulling out his wallet and leaving several $100 bills on the table. "The card I gave you. Call that number when you've made your choice. Or don't call, and we'll never speak again." He turned to leave, his security falling into formation. At the door he paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read. "For what it's worth, Emma, broken things are often the strongest." They've already survived the breaking. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with cold espresso and a choice that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to jump or step back to safety, except I wasn't sure which direction was which anymore. I didn't call. For 3 days I carried Dante's card in my pocket like a talisman or a curse. I couldn't decide which. During my shifts at Romano's, I felt eyes on me constantly. His security, probably, making sure I didn't run or do something stupid. The weight of their surveillance should have angered me. Instead, it made me feel seen in a way I hadn't been in months. On the second night, I came home to find my landlord waiting in the hallway, his expression apologetic but firm. "Emma, I'm sorry, but I need to talk to you about the rent." My stomach dropped. I paid on time. I know. But the building's being sold. New owners want to renovate, raise the rates. You've got 60 days to find somewhere else. 60 days. I did the math in my head. First month, last month, security deposit on a new place, moving costs. Even working both jobs, even saving every penny, I'd never make it. Not in Boston, where studio apartments cost more than some people's mortgages. That night, I pulled out Dante's card and stared at it until the numbers blurred. Just a contract, he'd said. No love, no messy emotions. But nothing was ever that simple. I knew enough about men like him, from movies, from whispered stories, from the careful way people said his name, to understand that contracts with the devil rarely ended well for the person signing. On the third day, my phone rang during my lunch shift. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Miss Collins. Marco's voice, warm and professional. Mr. Moretti asked me to remind you that today is the final day of your deliberation period. He'll be at the Harborview estate until midnight if you wish to speak with him in person. I haven't decided. He knows. But he thought you should have the address regardless. Marco rattled off a location in Dover, one of Boston's wealthiest suburbs. There's a car waiting outside your apartment building. It will remain there until midnight, should you choose to use it. He hung up before I could respond. Jessica materialized at my elbow, her eyes wide. Who was that? You look like you've seen a ghost. Nothing. Nobody. I shoved the phone in my pocket, hands trembling. I need to take my break. I spent 15 minutes in the bathroom, staring at my reflection and trying to breathe. The fluorescent lights made me look corpse pale, emphasizing the shadows under my eyes and the way my collarbones jutted too sharply beneath my uniform. You eat one meal a day because rent is expensive, Dante's words echoed in my skull. He'd seen through me so easily, cataloged my failures and survival mechanisms with clinical precision. Part of me hated him for it. Part of me was grateful someone had finally looked closely enough to notice. My shift ended at 9. I took the bus home instead of the subway, watching the city slide past in a blur of lights and shadows. The Mercedes was exactly where Marco said it would be, idling at the curb like a patient predator. The driver, a different man than Marco, younger, with a scar bisecting his left cheek, nodded when I approached. Miss Collins, are we going to Dover? The question hung in the air, last chance to walk away, to choose safety over the unknown. I got in the car. The Harborview estate sat behind iron gates and stone walls that screamed old money and older secrets. As we drove up the winding driveway, I caught glimpses of manicured gardens, a fountain illuminated by underwater lights, and finally, the house itself, a sprawling colonial that belonged on the cover of architectural magazines. Security checkpoints, cameras, men with earpieces who watched our approach with the dead-eyed focus of professionals. This wasn't just wealth. This was a fortress. The car stopped beneath a portico where warm light spilled from leaded glass windows. Marco waited at the entrance, his expression carefully neutral. Miss Collins, Mr. Moretti is in his study. Follow me, please. Inside, the house smelled like beeswax and old books and something floral I couldn't identify. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that was probably worth more than I'd earn in a lifetime, but it wasn't cold or sterile. Toys scattered in corners, a stuffed elephant, building blocks, a child's drawing taped to an ornate mirror. Evidence of the 9 lives Dante had mentioned. Marco led me through hallways that twisted and turned, past rooms I glimpsed only briefly. A kitchen where a woman in an apron chopped vegetables, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a living room where 2 young girls in pajamas watched cartoons, their laughter high and sweet. Finally, we reached a heavy wooden door. Marco knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for a response. Miss Collins, sir. Dante stood by a window overlooking gardens I couldn't fully see in the darkness. He'd shed his jacket, rolled his sleeves to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and crossed with scars. A glass of amber liquid sat untouched on his desk, next to yet another phone and a scattered pile of documents. Thank you, Marco. He didn't turn around. Closed the door. The click of the latch felt final, like a cell door shutting. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I studied his reflection in the window's glass, The set of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the windowsill like he was holding himself back from something. "I didn't think you'd come," he said finally. "I didn't think I would either." That earned me a glance over his shoulder, dark eyes assessing. "But here you are. Here I am." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I have questions." "Of course you do." He turned fully, leaning against the windowsill with deceptive casualness. "Ask." "Why me?" The words burst out. "You could have anyone. Someone from your world. Someone who understands this life. Why offer this to a broke waitress you met 3 days ago?" Dante was quiet for a beat, considering. "Because everyone from my world wants something. Power, connections, status. They see my children as obligations or stepping stones." His expression hardened. "You see them as people. I watched you look at those photographs, Emma. You didn't calculate their worth or your advantage. You just saw 9 kids who needed someone to give a damn. You don't know that. I do." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "I've spent my life reading people. It's how I've survived this long in a business where trust is fatal and everyone's playing an angle. You're not playing anything. You're just trying to survive without compromising the parts of yourself that still believe the world can be good." He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that I could smell cedar and smoke, and something underneath. Soap, maybe. Or the whiskey he hadn't touched. "I need someone who will love my children without agenda. Who will be there when I can't be, which is often. Who won't decide motherhood is too hard when the novelty wears off." His voice dropped lower. "And you need a reason to stop running from the woman who called you broken. This arrangement benefits us both. It's insane," I whispered. But the protest sounded weak even to me. "Probably." A ghost of that rare smile. Most worthwhile things are. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the room's warmth. "What would you expect from me, specifically?" "Honesty." Dante ticked items off on his fingers. "Loyalty to my children, and by extension to me. Discretion about my business affairs. You'll see things, hear things. Those stay within these walls. Public appearances when necessary to maintain the fiction of a normal marriage." He paused. "And you'll live here, obviously. This is where the children are. And physically?" I couldn't look at him. "You said no messy emotions, but I won't touch you unless you ask me to." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "This is a business arrangement, Emma. I have no interest in forcing intimacy where none is wanted." Something about the way he said it made me look up. His expression was carefully blank, but I caught something in his eyes. Resignation, maybe, or loneliness. The look of someone who'd accepted that certain things simply weren't meant for him. "How long?" I asked. "This arrangement? Is there an end date?" "No." He moved back to his desk, putting distance between us. "Divorce in my family is complicated, messy, dangerous for everyone involved. If you agree to this, it's permanent. I won't lie about that. Permanent." The word settled over me like snow, cold and absolute. "I need to think." "No." Dante's interruption was gentle but firm. "You've had 3 days to think. Now you need to decide. Yes or no, Emma. Jump or step back." My heart hammered against my ribs. Every logical thought screamed this was wrong, reckless, the beginning of a disaster I couldn't foresee. But logic hadn't kept me warm in my studio apartment. Logic hadn't filled the hollow space Derek left when he walked away. Logic was just another word for safe, and safe had gotten me exactly nowhere. I thought about the children in those photographs, the toys scattered through this enormous house, the laughter I'd heard from the living room. I thought about my landlord's apologetic face, and my dwindling bank account, and the bone-deep exhaustion of working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. I thought about Derek's voice. "You're broken." And I thought about Dante's quiet correction. Broken things are often the strongest. "Yes." The word came out barely audible. I cleared my throat, tried again. "Yes, I'll do it." Something flickered across Dante's face. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. He pulled open a desk drawer and extracted a document, already prepared, like he'd known all along what my answer would be. "This is the contract. Read it carefully." My lawyer will be here tomorrow to notarize if you still agree to the terms. I took the papers with numb fingers, scanning clauses about financial arrangements, custody expectations, grounds for termination, death being the primary one, which didn't exactly comfort me. The numbers made my head spin. Monthly allowance, trust funds for the children, a separate account in my name that would receive regular deposits. This is too much, I protested. It's what my wife deserves. He said it simply, like it was obvious. You'll need clothing appropriate for your new position, personal items, anything that makes you comfortable. Marco will arrange accounts at the necessary establishments. I don't know how to be this person. The confession escaped before I could stop it. I don't know how to be a wife to someone like you or a mother to 9 children or any of this. Dante circled the desk, and suddenly he was close again, close enough to touch though he didn't. Instead, he caught my gaze and held it. You know how to survive. That's all anyone needs to know. His hand lifted, hovering near my face for a heartbeat, before he seemed to think better of it and let it fall. The wedding will be small, next Saturday. Just family and necessary witnesses. We'll say it was a whirlwind romance. My family won't question it. They've learned not to question me. Next Saturday. 7 days. 7 days until I became Mrs. Dante Moretti, and stepped into a life I couldn't begin to imagine. Unless you've changed your mind. He watched me carefully, looking for hesitation. I thought about my apartment with its water stains and my 2 jobs and my careful, small, lonely life. Then I thought about the sound of children's laughter and the possibility, however strange, however unlikely, of mattering to someone again. No, I haven't changed my mind. Good. Dante moved to a cabinet, pulled out 2 fresh glasses and a bottle of something expensive looking. He poured precisely, handed one to me. Then we should seal this agreement properly. I took the glass, crystal heavy in my hand. To what? This insane arrangement? To new beginnings. His glass touched mine with a clear bell-like ring, and to broken things that refused to stay broken. We drank. The liquor burned going down, warming me from the inside out. Through the window behind Dante, I could see lights scattered across the estate's grounds. Security posts, probably, or garden features. A gilded cage, beautiful and inescapable. I'd traded one trap for another, exchanged loneliness for obligation. But when I looked at Dante's face in the window's reflection, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction at a deal well made, or triumph at acquiring something he wanted. I saw someone who looked just as uncertain as I felt, standing at his own cliff's edge, hoping this leap wouldn't destroy them both. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of impossible adjustments. Marco arrived at my apartment Monday morning with 3 other men who packed my meager belongings with efficiency that bordered on military precision. Everything I owned fit into 4 boxes. 4 boxes to summarize 26 years of existence. Is this all, Miss Collins? Marco asked gently, surveying my empty studio with kind eyes. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. This place had been a prison of sorts, cramped, lonely, barely functional. But it had been mine. Now I was trading autonomy for security, and the weight of that choice pressed against my chest like a physical thing. The estate in Dover swallowed me whole. Marco showed me to a suite on the 2nd floor. Bedroom, sitting room, bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in. Silk curtains, furniture that looked antique and probably was, a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my exact size. Mr. Moretti had these prepared, Marco explained, gesturing to the racks of dresses, slacks, shoes arranged by color and style. If anything doesn't suit, just let us know. How did he know my measurements? Marco's smile was enigmatic. Mr. Moretti is thorough. That word again. Thorough. Another term for invasive, for controlling, for a man who left nothing to chance. I spent that first afternoon exploring the house like a ghost, haunting unfamiliar halls. The place was massive. 12 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, rooms whose purposes I could only guess at, but it wasn't cold despite its size. Children's artwork covered an entire wall in one hallway. A playroom overflowed with toys and books and the beautiful chaos of young lives. The kitchen smelled perpetually of baking bread and something sweet. I met the children on Tuesday. Maria, the oldest at 14, watched me with dark eyes identical to her father's, assessing and careful. "So you're the one Papa's marrying?" Not a question. I sat across from her in the sunlit breakfast room, acutely aware of the other 8 pairs of eyes trained on me. They ranged in age from tiny Sophia, barely 2 and clinging to her nanny's leg, to the twins, Marco and Lucia, age 12, who whispered to each other in Italian I couldn't understand. "Yes," I said simply. "I know this is strange. Strange is Papa bringing anyone home." This from Alessandro, age 10, his expression suspicious. "The last one left after 3 months, said we were too much work." My heart cracked. "You're not too much of anything, and I'm not going anywhere. That's what they all say." Maria's voice carried the world weariness of someone far older than 14. "Until Papa's business takes priority, or we get too loud, or too messy, or too real." I understood then what Dante had meant. These children had been abandoned repeatedly, left by mothers who saw them as obligations rather than people. They'd learned not to trust promises or hope for permanence. "I can't make you believe me," I told them honestly. "Not yet. But I can show up every day and be here. That's all I'm asking. A chance to prove I mean what I say." Little Sophia broke away from her nanny and toddled over, sticky hands reaching for me. I lifted her automatically, settling her on my hip. She smelled like apple juice and baby shampoo, solid and warm and utterly trusting in the way only small children could be. "Pretty," she announced, patting my face with syrup-sticky fingers. The other children watched this interaction with varying degrees of surprise. Even Maria's expression softened fractionally. "She doesn't usually warm up to strangers," the nanny, Mrs. Chen, who I'd seen cooking in the kitchen, observed. "You must have a gift." I didn't have a gift. I just knew what it felt like to be left. And I'd be damned if I'd do that to anyone else, especially not to 9 children who'd already survived too many departures. Dante was absent most of that week. I saw him in passing, emerging from his study at odd hours, taking phone calls in Italian that sounded tense, leaving before dawn in armored SUVs surrounded by security. When our paths crossed, he was unfailingly polite but distant, like I was a business associate, rather than his soon-to-be wife. Wednesday evening, I found him in the library, surrounded by papers and looking exhausted in a way that went bone deep. He'd loosened his tie, rolled his sleeves, and the lamplight threw shadows across his face that made him look older. "You should eat something," I said from the doorway. He glanced up, surprise flickering across his features. "I'll eat later. You said that 4 hours ago." I entered uninvited, carrying the sandwich I'd made in the kitchen. "Mrs. Chen mentioned you skip meals when you're working. Mrs. Chen talks too much," but he took the sandwich, studying it like he couldn't quite believe I'd made it. "Thank you." I perched on the edge of a leather chair, watching him eat with the mechanical efficiency of someone refueling rather than enjoying. The children told me about the others, the women who left. Dante's jaw tightened. "They talk too much as well. They're scared I'll leave too. Will you?" He set down the sandwich, attention fully on me now. "Have second thoughts already, Emma. Every 5 minutes." The honesty felt risky but necessary. "But I gave you my word. I don't break promises." Something in his expression eased. "Good. Neither do I. Can I ask you something?" I waited for his nod. "Why did they leave? The mothers. Was it really just because the children were too much work?" Dante was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness that matched his appearance. "I don't love easily, Emma. Maybe I can't love at all. I'm not sure anymore. The women I chose to have children with, they wanted the fantasy, the passionate romance, the all-consuming devotion, the man who'd burn the world down for them." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "I gave them security, respect, partnership, but that wasn't enough. They wanted something I couldn't provide, so they left. Took their settlements and walked away from children they'd stopped seeing as people." The pain underneath his words was carefully controlled, but unmistakable. Here was a man who'd tried to build something real, and failed repeatedly. who'd learned to protect himself by expecting nothing and offering less. "I won't ask you for love," I said quietly. "I don't have any left to give anyway." His eyes met mine, and I saw recognition there. Two broken people agreeing not to cut each other on their sharp edges. "Then we understand each other." He stood, moving to a cabinet and withdrawing a small box. "I have something for you." Inside was a ring, not ostentatious or flashy, just a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the ceiling. Beautiful in its restraint. "It was my grandmother's," Dante explained. "She married my grandfather in an arrangement not unlike ours. They learned to care for each other over time, built something real from a business transaction." He took the ring out, holding it between us. "I'd like you to have it, if you'll accept." I extended my hand, trembling slightly. Dante slid the ring onto my finger with surprising gentleness, his calloused hands warm against my skin. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd probably had it sized based on the measurements he'd somehow acquired. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "So are you." The words hung between us, unexpected and disarming. I looked up to find him closer than I'd realized, close enough to see gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "Dante." A phone buzzed. He stepped back immediately, checking the screen with a frown. "I need to take this. Business." And just like that, the moment shattered. He was back to being the untouchable Mafia boss, and I was back to being the stranger he'd hired to mother his children. I left him to his call, the ring heavy on my finger, a tangible reminder of the bargain I'd made. The wedding took place Saturday afternoon in the estate's gardens, beneath an arbor wound with white roses that released perfume when the breeze caught them. 20 people attended, family members whose names I couldn't keep straight, a priest who looked nervous despite his steady voice, security positioned at intervals like lethal statues. I wore a dress Dante had chosen, cream silk that fell in simple lines, elegant without being ostentatious. My hair hung loose for once, and someone had done my makeup so I looked like a better version of myself, almost like I belonged here. The children stood as witnesses. Maria held Sophia, who kept trying to grab the flowers. The twins whispered behind their hands. Alessandro watched with the same suspicious assessment he'd given me all week. And Dante stood at the altar in a charcoal suit, looking simultaneously powerful and vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. The ceremony blurred. I heard myself speak vows I barely registered, felt Dante's hands, steady and warm, slide a matching platinum band onto my finger beside his grandmother's ring. Heard the priest pronounce us husband and wife. "You may kiss the bride." Dante hesitated, his eyes searching mine for permission. I gave the smallest nod, and he leaned in slowly, telegraphing his intentions. His lips brushed mine, chaste, brief, appropriate for the audience watching. But I felt the restraint in it, the careful control of a man who'd spent a lifetime managing his responses. When he pulled back, his thumb grazed my cheek in a gesture so fleeting I might have imagined it. "Mrs. Moretti," he murmured, so quietly only I could hear. "Welcome to the family." Applause rippled through the small gathering. Sophia squealed with delight, and I stood there, ring on my finger and a new name attached to my identity, wondering what exactly I'd just committed myself to. The reception was mercifully small. Dinner in the formal dining room, toasts I barely heard, cake that tasted like sawdust in my nervous mouth. Dante's family congratulated us with varying degrees of sincerity. An older man, his uncle, I gathered, pulled him aside for a tense conversation in Italian that involved sharp gestures and harder glances my direction. "Ignore Salvatore," Maria said quietly, appearing at my elbow. "He thinks Papa's making a mistake, marrying someone outside the families." "Am I? A mistake?" She studied me with those two old eyes. "Ask me in 6 months, fair enough." As the evening wore on, exhaustion crept in. I'd slept poorly all week, anxiety gnawing at me every time I closed my eyes. Now the adrenaline was fading, leaving me hollow and shaky. Dante found me on the terrace, escaping the noise inside. The sun had set, leaving the gardens bathed in artificial light and long shadows. "Tired?" he asked, joining me at the railing. Overwhelmed. I turned to face him. "This is really happening. I'm really your wife now. Having regrets?" I think regrets require time to develop properly. I managed a weak smile. Ask me tomorrow. He almost laughed. Almost. Maria said the same thing. We stood in comfortable silence, watching security patrol the grounds with practiced efficiency. In the distance, I could hear the children's voices, arguing about bedtime, probably. They'll test you, Dante said eventually. Push boundaries. See if you'll break like the others did. I won't break. I believe you. He turned to face me fully, and in the low light, his expression was unguarded for once. Emma, I need you to understand something. My business, what I do, it's dangerous. I've made enemies. There are people who would hurt my children to hurt me. That's why the security, why the walls, why I'm so careful about who enters our lives. I understand. Do you? His hand lifted, cupping my face with unexpected tenderness. Because once you're truly part of this world, there's no leaving. Even if you wanted to, the things you'll see, the things you'll know, they'll make you a target too. I can protect you, but I need you to be smart, careful. Never trust anyone completely except Marco and Mrs. Chen. A chill ran down my spine. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to prepare you. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the gesture almost reverent. You're mine to protect now, Emma. That means something in my world. It means I'll destroy anyone who threatens you. But it also means you need to let me keep you safe. The possessiveness in his words should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something else entirely. A dark thrill at being claimed, at mattering enough to warrant that fierce protection. Okay, I whispered. I'll be careful. Good. He released me, stepping back into formality. Your room is prepared. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start establishing routines with the children. He turned to leave, but I caught his sleeve. Dante? Yes. Thank you. For this. For giving me a purpose when I'd forgotten what that felt like. His expression softened fractionally. Thank you for saying yes when any sane person would have run. Then he was gone, disappearing into the house and leaving me alone with the night and the weight of the choice I'd made. I touched my rings, tangible proof this wasn't a dream. Mrs. Emma Moretti, wife, mother, part of a world I didn't understand but was now irrevocably bound to. The wind carried the scent of roses and something darker underneath. Danger, maybe. Or possibility. I went inside to face whatever came next. Block 5. The first month of marriage taught me that love and obsession weren't always distinguishable, and that safety could feel like suffocation if you weren't careful. Dante's protection revealed itself in layers. First came the obvious things. Security, who followed me everywhere, even to the grocery store I insisted on visiting myself because I needed some semblance of normalcy. Then the subtler manifestations. My coffee appeared each morning exactly how I liked it, though I'd never told anyone my preferences. Clothes in my closet perfectly suited to each day's schedule. A new car in the garage with my name on the registration, fully armored and equipped with a panic button that connected directly to Dante's phone. It's too much, I told him one morning, 2 weeks into our arrangement. He looked up from his breakfast, espresso and a single piece of toast he'd barely touched, with genuine confusion. What is? All of it. The guards, the tracking, the way you have people anticipating my needs before I've even identified them. I set down my own coffee cup with more force than necessary. I feel like I'm under surveillance. You are under surveillance. He said it matter-of-factly, like this was obvious. You're my wife, Emma. That makes you valuable to my enemies. Every movement you make, every person you interact with, represents a potential threat vector. I'm a person, not a tactical liability. Something flickered in his eyes, irritation maybe, or hurt. You're both, and I won't apologize for keeping you safe. The children witnessed this exchange from the doorway. Maria raised an eyebrow, a gesture so like her father, it would have been funny under different circumstances. The twins exchanged knowing looks. Even little Sophia seemed to sense the tension, her bottom lip trembling. I forced myself to soften. I'm not asking you to stop protecting me. Just to remember I'm not a prisoner. Dante stood, buttoning his suit jacket with precise movements. The distinction is negligible when the consequences of carelessness are the same. He left for work, or whatever he called the mysterious business that kept him away for hours, sometimes days. And I was left with the children and my growing understanding that I'd married a man who confused possession with protection, who couldn't separate keeping someone safe from keeping them controlled. But the children needed me, and that made everything else bearable. Alessandro's nightmares started the second week. I'd hear him crying at 3 a.m, muffled sobs that broke something in my chest. The first time, I went to him without thinking, settling on the edge of his bed in the darkness. "Hey," I whispered. "Bad dream?" He nodded, ashamed tears on his cheeks, 10 years old and already trying to be tough, to not need comfort. "Want to talk about it?" Mama left. His voice cracked. "In the dream, I mean. She just walked out and didn't look back. And Papa said it was my fault for being too loud, too messy, too much." "Stop." I pulled him into my arms, this child who barely knew me but needed someone so desperately. "You are not too much. You're exactly right. And I'm not leaving. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Because I made a promise to you and your siblings, and I don't break promises. Ever." He cried against my shoulder, and I held him until the tears stopped and his breathing evened into sleep. When I tried to leave, his hand caught mine. "Stay?" So I stayed, curled awkwardly in his too small bed, keeping watch over this broken child who'd learned too young that love was conditional. I didn't know Dante stood in the doorway until I heard his quiet footsteps retreating down the hall. The incident with Viviana happened 3 weeks in. I was at the children's school for parent-teacher conferences, a responsibility Dante usually delegated to nannies, but that I'd insisted on handling. Maria needed someone who actually cared about her declining math grades and increasing absences. The twins deserved parents who noticed when they excelled at science. Alessandro's teacher wanted to discuss his anxiety in class. I was leaving the building, juggling folders and my purse, when a red Ferrari pulled up to the curb. The woman who emerged wore designer everything, and a smile sharp enough to cut, Viviana. From the wedding reception, the woman Dante had dismissed with a single word. "So you're the latest Mrs. Moretti." She looked me up and down, assessment cold and thorough. "I give you 6 months, maybe less." "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "Not yet, but you will." She stepped closer, and I caught her perfume. Expensive, cloying. "Dante has a type, you know. Broken little birds he can fix and control. It makes him feel powerful, having someone depend on him completely." My security detail had materialized, Marco and 2 others, forming a subtle barrier between us. But Viviana just laughed. "Oh, he's got you locked down tight, doesn't he? Does he track your phone? Monitor your spending? Decide who you can see and when?" Her smile was poisonous. "That's not protection, sweetheart. That's ownership. I think you should leave." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm leaving. But consider this a warning. Dante Moretti doesn't love. He possesses. And when you inevitably disappoint him, when you fail to be whatever perfect fantasy he's constructed, he'll discard you like he did me. Like he did all the others." She slid back into her Ferrari and drove off, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with my heart pounding and doubts multiplying like bacteria. Marco touched my elbow gently. "Miss Emma, we should go." "She's wrong," I said, needing to hear it aloud. Dante's not like that. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Moretti is protective, sometimes to extremes, but his intentions are good, even when his methods are questionable. That non-answer terrified me more than Viviana's accusations. I confronted Dante that night in his study. He looked up from his laptop, surprise registering when I closed the door behind me with more force than necessary. "We need to talk." "About?" But I saw awareness in his eyes. His security had already reported the encounter. About boundaries, about the difference between protection and control. I crossed my arms, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "I met Viviana today." His expression went cold. "What did she want?" To warn me about you, apparently. To tell me you confuse possession with love and that I'm just another broken thing you're trying to fix. And you believe her? His voice was dangerously quiet. I don't know what to believe, the words burst out. You track my every movement, anticipate my needs before I voice them, surround me with guards like I'm some precious artifact that might shatter. Sometimes it feels like protection. Sometimes it feels like a cage. Dante stood slowly, and I forced myself not to step back as he approached. He stopped just close enough that I could feel his presence, smell his familiar cedar smoke scent. You want to know the truth, Emma? His hand lifted to my face, thumb tracing my jawline with unexpected gentleness. I am obsessed with keeping you safe. Irrationally, completely obsessed. Because every time I close my eyes, I see 1,000 ways you could be hurt, taken, destroyed by people who want to damage me. That's not healthy. I know. His other hand came up, cradling my face like I was something precious and fragile. I know it's not healthy or normal, or probably even sane. But I've lost too much, Emma. Watched too many people I should have protected suffer because I wasn't careful enough, wasn't vigilant enough. I won't let that happen to you. I'm not yours to lose. But even as I said it, I felt the lie in the words. I'd given myself to him the moment I signed that contract, agreed to wear his ring, took his name. Aren't you? His forehead pressed against mine, and I felt him trembling with restraint. You're my wife, the mother of my children. You sleep under my roof and wear my grandmother's ring and carry my name. If that doesn't make you mine, what does? Choice, I whispered. I need to feel like I chose this, not that I'm trapped in it. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Then choose now. Tell me to back off, to give you space, to treat this like the business arrangement we agreed to. I'll do it. I'll hate every second, but I'll do it if that's what you need. I should have said yes. Should have established boundaries and demanded the independence I'd sacrificed for security, but standing there with his hands on my face and his eyes burning into mine, I couldn't find the words, because the terrifying truth was that I liked being claimed, liked mattering enough to warrant his obsessive protection. After months of being invisible, being treated like damaged goods, being told I was broken, Dante's possession felt like validation. I don't want you to back off, I admitted, shame and relief mixing in equal measure. I just need to know this is real, that I'm not just another responsibility you're managing. Emma. He said my name like a prayer. You're the only thing in my life I chose for myself. Everything else, the business, the responsibilities, the weight of my family's expectations, that was decided before I was born. But you? I chose you, and I'd choose you again every single day. His lips met mine, and this kiss was nothing like the chaste brush at our wedding. This was claiming and need and barely leashed desperation. His hands tangled in my hair, holding me like I might disappear if he loosened his grip. I melted into him, drowning in sensation, the taste of whiskey on his tongue, the solid warmth of his chest, the way he controlled every aspect of the kiss while somehow making me feel powerful. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had gone nearly black. I need you to understand something. His voice was rough, wrecked. This stopped being a business arrangement for me weeks ago. Maybe it never was. And if you can't handle that, if you need distance, tell me now before I fall so deep there's no coming back. I looked at this dangerous, damaged man, who'd somehow become essential to my existence in less than a month, who protected his children with fierce devotion and managed his empire with cold precision and kissed me like I was oxygen. I don't want distance, I said. I want real. Whatever this is, I want the truth of it. The truth is, I'm obsessed with you. He kissed me again, softer this time. The truth is, I check on you at night to make sure you're breathing. The truth is, I've memorized your schedule and your preferences, and the way you smile when Sophia does something cute. The truth is, I'm possessive and jealous and probably toxic in at least 17 different ways. The truth is, I don't care. I pulled him closer. The truth is, I'm tired of being invisible, and you see me. The truth is, being possessed by you feels safer than being alone. Something in him broke. He lifted me, carrying me to the leather couch against the wall. We collided there in a tangle of desperate hands and shed clothing, learning each other's bodies with the urgency of people who'd denied themselves too long. Later, wrapped in his arms with my head on his chest, I listened to his heartbeat and tried to reconcile the man who'd just made love to me with breathless reverence with the cold Mafia boss who ordered people's lives with single words. "I'm keeping you," he murmured into my hair. "Just so we're clear." "Good." I traced patterns on his chest, following scars I'd noticed earlier but hadn't asked about, because I'm not going anywhere. His arms tightened around me. "Promise me." "I promise." The next 3 months proved that love built on obsession could be simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. Dante's possessiveness manifested in increasingly obvious ways. He couldn't stand other men looking at me for too long. At a charity gala, I watched him have a quiet word with a businessman who'd been too friendly, and the man left early with a bleeding nose he tried to hide with a handkerchief. "You can't hit everyone who talks to me," I said in the car ride home. "Watch me." But his hand found mine in the darkness, threading our fingers together with surprising gentleness. The children flourished under actual parental attention. Alessandro's nightmares decreased. Maria's grades improved. The twins started trusting me with secrets. Sophia called me Mama one morning at breakfast, and I had to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom while Dante watched with something that might have been love in his eyes. We fell into routines. Family dinners where chaos reigned, bedtime stories that ran long, Sunday mornings in bed while Mrs. Chen watched the children. Dante taught me phrases in Italian. I taught him how to braid Maria's hair. We built something real from our artificial beginning, growing together like vines around a trellis. But Viviana's warning echoed sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep. He doesn't love. He possesses. Was there a difference? Did it matter if the end result was the same? The resolution came on a Tuesday in December, 3 days before Christmas. I was baking cookies with the younger children when Marco appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression grim. "Miss Emma, we have a situation." My blood went cold. "The children are fine. It's Mr. Moretti." He gestured toward the door. "There's been an incident. He's in his study and asking for you." I flew down the hallway, flour still dusting my hands, heart hammering against my ribs. Dante sat at his desk, shirt torn and bloody, while a doctor I didn't recognize stitched a gash across his shoulder. "What happened?" I demanded. "Ambush." His voice was tight with pain. "Salvatore's people. They wanted to send a message about my choices." "You mean me?" Understanding dawned, sick and horrible. "They targeted you because of me." "They targeted me because I married outside the approved families. Yes." He dismissed the doctor with a nod, then focused entirely on me. "This is my world, Emma. Violence and consequences and people who think they have a say in how I live my life. You could have been killed. I've survived worse." He stood, wincing slightly, and crossed to where I stood frozen in the doorway. "The question is whether you can handle this. The reality of what being my wife actually means." I looked at him. This man who'd been attacked because he chose me over tradition, who bled defending a marriage that started as a contract, who looked at me like I was worth dying for. "Can you handle me handling it?" I asked. "Can you stand back and let me be part of this world instead of just something you protect from it?" A slow smile crossed his face. "No. But I can try to find a compromise that doesn't make you feel like a prisoner. And I can try to accept that your obsessive protection comes from love, not control." I closed the distance between us, careful of his injury. "We're both broken, Dante, but maybe broken things fit together better than perfect ones ever could." He kissed me then, soft and sweet despite the blood and adrenaline. "I love you," he murmured against my lips. "I've probably loved you since you spilled champagne on me and looked at me like I was a person instead of a monster. I love you too." The words felt both terrifying and inevitable, even though you're controlling and possessive and probably need therapy. "Definitely need therapy." He rested his forehead against mine. "Will you stay anyway?" "Forever," I promised. "For better or worse, in sickness and health, through ambushes and family drama and whatever else this insane life throws at us." "Forever," he echoed. "I'm holding you to that." Christmas morning arrived with the chaos of 9 children tearing through wrapped presents, while Dante and I watched from the couch, his arm around my shoulders, my hand resting on his chest where I could feel his heartbeat. "Happy?" he asked quietly. I surveyed the beautiful disaster of our life. Children laughing, wrapping paper everywhere, Sophia trying to eat a bow while Maria attempted damage control, the twins arguing over a shared gift, Alessandro showing me a book he'd received with genuine excitement. "Deliriously," I answered truthfully. I'd come to this arrangement expecting nothing, just safety and purpose and a way to stop running from the woman Derek called broken. Instead, I'd found a family that needed me as much as I needed them. I'd found a man who loved me with such fierce intensity it should have frightened me but instead made me feel invincible. I'd found myself again, stronger in the breaking and rebuilding than I ever was whole. Dante's hand found mine, our rings catching the morning light. "Thank you," he said softly, "for choosing me, for staying, for loving my children like they're yours. They are mine." I kissed him gently. "Just like you are. And I choose this. Choose you. Every single day." Sophia toddled over, demanding to be lifted. Dante pulled her onto his lap, and she immediately tried to steal his coffee while he laughed, an actual, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. This was real. This was ours, built from brokenness and contracts, and a chance